Today we're going to be diving right back into 90 Day Fiancé Season 11. If you'd like to check out my latest video that I did, I'll link it in the corner for you guys. But without further ado, let's dive right back into the somewhat chaoticness of this season. So first off, we got Stevie and Maddie. I guess Maddie is kind of feeling uncomfortable or uneasy with regards to Stevie's paintings of women and their bodies, and he's really wondering if she's attracted to them. And eventually they go to this gym. He casually kind of asks, like, hey, are you attracted to women? Like, he didn't even say it really aggressively. And then immediately she's just like, I'm not gonna answer that. Like, we're not having this conversation. And when the producers kind of push her on it, she's just like, yeah, I feel like we just don't need to talk about that. He should know that I'm attracted to him, and that's the end of the conversation. But personally, if that's your partner and that's someone you're intimate with on numerous levels, I don't understand why you can't just answer the question. Like, it makes it kind of seem like you have something to hide. It's just kind of strange. Why can't you just say yes or no? But at the same time, maybe she's just not interested in having that conversation because she's uncomfortable, but it was just a little weird. But they also seem to have more tension surrounding Maddie's feelings about, possibly going home or being homesick, and he keeps talking about it. They kind of run into, at least in the next episode, they seem to run into some issues with that, and she's telling him, you need to stop talking to them every single day. So we'll probably have to talk about that in another video, but let's move on to Mark and Mina. So after the little blow up, or somewhat big blow up, between Mina and Mark's daughter Jordan, they were on the beach and they were talking, and at the end of the conversation, Mina's just like, you know what? You're not coming to the wedding. You're disinvited. You're a snake. I can't have a snake at my wedding. And Mark is just like, oh my gosh, this is not how I wanted this to go. The next day, they try to have like a family get together. They have to take a ferry over to Mark's family member's house. On the ferry, Jordan tries to actually make amends. So things seem to be on a more cordial note. When they get to the family member's house, Jordan kind of makes it awkward, because it's already kind of awkward because Mark's family, they do have some issues connected to Mina that they never really spoke about. Apparently when they were in France and Mina and Mark had their daughter's, I think, baptism or something, I guess she made them wait for several hours. She never apologized for it, and it put a bad taste in their mouth. It's just awkward, okay? But of course they're trying their best to make it not awkward, but it's not really working. Jordan just kind of comes right out, and she's just like, oh, are you guys thinking about signing, the prenup? And I'm just like, what makes you think that this time, right here, right now, is good for you to bring that conversation up? Again, it's the overstepping for me. I really feel like I was on Mina's side in this situation. I understood why she disinvited Jordan from the wedding, even though I do think that she should be there because you don't want to cause a big rift with Mark's kids. At the same time, why does she keep overstepping? And also, why is Mark not putting her in her place? Like, I just don't understand. Like, that's still your dad. You can't tell your dad what to do and give him his space to make his own decisions. He's not your child. Mark should have that conversation with Jordan because she keeps overstepping. But I think that Mark just hasn't really set any boundaries with her. So it's almost like she's not overstepping because there's no boundaries to overstep. But in my mind, I would have been set certain boundaries. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, off and she's like distressed, okay? She's getting emotional, she's crying, and one of Mark's family members, it was an older lady, she walks over, she tries to comfort Mina, and she's just like, I really feel like you should have a chat with Jordan. But Jordan walks over. Jordan's just like, yeah, I feel like I deserve an apology, for you calling me a snake. And then of course Mina is just like, I think that there was like an issue with their translation, so it kind of came across as rude. But I think Mina knew what she was saying. She knew good and darn well she meant what she said. But anyways, they make amends. After they came off the ferry, Mina goes to Mark and she's just like, I'm not signing those papers. I just told you that I was gonna sign the prenup while I was there. So now Mark is like, okay, now we gotta go back to square one, because what do you mean you're not signing the dang prenup? I'm not getting married to you if you don't sign the prenup. Like, what? Now next we have Matt, Imani, and Annie, our throuple of the season. And it's not going so well. In the last video, I definitely basically talked about Annie and Matt. They slept together without Amani knowing, and Annie ended up telling Amani, and that was a whole thing in itself. And they kind of talk it out, and Amani's just like, yeah, we need to set some ground rules. Like, you're gonna have to ask for my permission before you sleep with her. Basically talking to Matt. And I just honestly wonder, like, does she have to also ask permission to sleep with Annie? You know, ask permission from Matt? Like, she's very territorial of Annie, but at the same time, she wants, like, them to be in a relationship, like an actual throuple. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, why the other two parties and not everyone involved has to ask for permission, you know? But anyways, moving forward, they set those ground rules, but things get heated again when Amani brings up that she really wants Annie to tell her family that she's in a relationship with her. Like, it's not just Matt, it's her too. But Annie's like, there's a time for that. Like, stop pushing me to do something that I'm not ready to do. And I agree with her, because Amani, maybe in her head, like, she's so open with doing her and doing whatever she wants to do, she doesn't really understand where Annie's coming from. Like, she's not ready to basically talk to her family and be that open with her family yet about probably being in a relationship with a woman, let alone being in a relationship with a woman and a man. You know, they're married and you're just the extra person now being added to the relationship. Like, that's a lot, okay? That is a lot to put on your parents, especially if they're religious and, you know, they think a certain way. But Amani's not understanding that. She doesn't want to hear that. She walks off. She's like, you can't turn a 304 into a housewife. Hopefully y'all know what I mean by 304. But I was like, girl, like, calm yourself. Annie and Matt, they go to check on her. They try to calm her down. But again, Amani is pushing and pushing. And Annie's just like, no, like, I'm not, you know, like, she tries to basically say to Amani at one point, if you want me to, I'll tell my parents, I'll tell everybody about us. But Amani's just like, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. And Annie's just like, okay, I can't do this, you know? So she walks off, all frustrated. It's not a good situation right now. And again, I just knew that it was going to turn out like this, because it really only takes one thing. And the jealousy coming from Amani, like, she knows, she's very self-aware. She's a self-aware queen, in my opinion, because I think she knows that she is bleeding jealousy right now. I don't know where this is gonna go, but it's not heading in a good direction. Next, we have Gregory and Joan. We kind of left off with Joan talking to Gregory's friends, and she's just getting more and more upset with the fact that Gregory doesn't have a job, he doesn't have his life together, just listening to his friends talk about how he has a habit of being kind of comfortable and, you know, okay with being unstable and not having a job. And she's just like, what? You know, like, I didn't sign up for that. But after that is when we see that Joan, she talks to her family back in Uganda, and they're reminding her about the bride price. And he's just looking at her like, I don't think I'm gonna have that. Like, who has that type of money? And Joan, being extra snappy, she's just like, many people could afford it. It's just you. You're broke, basically. Like, she didn't really say it exactly like that, but it's just you. You know, you're the one that has no job, you're the one that can't afford the price. She's just like, listen, if you can't afford it, I don't think we're gonna be able to get married. Like, this is just not gonna happen. If you don't get a job by a certain time, I'm going back to Uganda. And I definitely don't blame her, because I think that Gregory is dragging his behind. He thinks things are just hunky-dory. You have a fiance over here, you're trying to get married, you have to pay her dowry, and you really think all of this is just fun and games, you know? So it's just irritating watching it, honestly. They're in a very interesting spot. Next, we have Shakina and Sarper. Sarper is now trying to get used to having to leave the house while Shakina does her thing. She kind of explained it a little bit more in terms of her business being an esthetician. Some of the women that she has in the house, some of them actually have to have some of their clothes off for certain procedures and certain things that she does. So obviously it's going to make people uncomfortable if there is someone else in the house. So now that she's explained that a little further, I do get it. But at the same time, I do think that she should try to find an office space separate from the house, because that's just not going to be feasible forever, okay? Now, Sarper, he's talking to his parents. He's just like, you know, obviously talking about his frustrations with regards to having to leave the house and do this, do that. And then we see that Shakina and Sarper, they take a trip, or like a little mini road trip, to go see Shakina's daughter. She's just like, if my daughter doesn't approve of Sarper, we can't be together. We can't get married. And even the daughter's just like, you know, don't push me. I understand where she's coming from because she explains that Shakina in the past has had other relationships where she kind of let her daughter get close to these people, and then things would happen in the relationship and it just would go downhill. So she doesn't really want to get too close to Sarper too quickly. She wants to ease her way into that and get to know him slowly, but he's not like fully approved as soon as she meets him, you know? So I get where she's coming from. But at the same time, it's like, Shakina, why bring this man from his country? You know you guys are gonna have to get married in 90 days or he's gonna have to go back. And if you try to do this whole process again, it's gonna look kind of shady. So I just don't understand her logic with this situation. So next we have Shawn and Aaliyah. Things are getting kind of interesting. In my last video, I did mention that I do think that Shawn is trying his best to accept Aaliyah, but I think in his head he's kind of slowly realizing that he might not be able to just be satisfied with Aaliyah, because obviously she might be seeking to go under the knife to get certain procedures done, and he's not okay with that, but he's not really expressing that in words. Communication is kind of lacking in that department with Shawn. But Aaliyah is getting very frustrated because she's not getting validated, and she feels as though Shawn might not be accepting of who she is and who she's becoming. And she's pretty much right, you know, like he's not accepting, but he's not communicating that. But again, I don't understand why he even proposed to her in the first place if he knew that that was going to be a problem. Like, if you know you're attracted to men, but you see that Aaliyah is going to be trying to, you know, get certain procedures done by surgical means, and things are going to be permanently done and enhanced, it might be that time to be like, you know what, this is not going to work. So I don't know why he's trying so hard to force this to work. She has some issues with, you know, germophobia and being very extra about, like, for example, her toothbrush being open. They have to go to the store to get a whole new toothbrush and a toothbrush cap. And while they're at that store, she sees an at-home, I think it was like a STD test or something like that. And she's just like, you know what, I think we're going to need one, because if we're going to have an open relationship, I need to know that you're being safe. And I understand, because, you know, Shawn, he seems very lackadaisical about the whole thing. He's just like, you know, she does her testing once a month, and I don't think she's ever really skipped a month. She's pretty paranoid about it. And I'm like, Shawn, that is something you might want to be paranoid about. Your health is nothing to play around with. But at the same time, with the open relationship, I think he's using that as a means to sleep with men without having to tell Aaliyah that he's really just attracted to the qualities of a man. He doesn't want to be with a trans woman. So it's just like, why don't you just tell her this? At some point, you're gonna have to tell her, because this is getting frustrating. But we're gonna move on to our last couple, Jessica and Juan. We left off with Jessica and Juan at like some type of bar, basically having dinner with two of her friends, but one of her friends in particular, she gets very much so emotional about finding out that Juan cheated on her friend, on Jessica. Then she also feels betrayed by Jessica, because here she is taking up for her. Then she finds out that Jessica was also cheating and running around with her ex-boyfriend. And Juan was in the middle of all of that, very confused. He's just like, what do you mean? Like, I was not privy to this information. So that was kind of like a shocker. But at the same time, I don't think he's in that space to really say much. So I would just sit there and kind of listen, and both of y'all just need to forgive each other. Either do that, or y'all move on, break up, try to find a way to co-parent. But regardless, I found it kind of weird how emotional her friend got. So in this most recent episode I saw, they talk finally, Jessica and her friend. They talk about that whole dinner situation. And Jessica basically explains to us that her friend doesn't really have that many friends. She's kind of like her main friend. So she sees Jessica as like a part of her. So if Juan cheats on Jessica, she feels as though she's been cheated on too. So I was like, okay, that makes sense, but at the same time, that's weird. That is weird as hell. She might need to get a life. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, she's way too connected to you. But at the same time, I would say that hearing that information for the first time, like your friend just decided, I'm just gonna drop that truth bomb on you. Yeah, I cheated too. I'm not an angel. I would have looked at her like, girl, really? They're in an interesting little spot. Juan is still acting kind of funny because he just found out that new piece of information, but I'm like, at this point, y'all need to either get over it or move on. That's all I pretty much have to say on these couples. They are very messy. They're in their individual messy situations, but y'all let me know your thoughts on this one down in the comments. I'll catch y'all in the next video.